Okay, perfect. So friends, we would be, steering the presentation in this format, a little bit discussion about the valuation and valuation backgrounds, then a bit of history, as we all know, but I wanted to brush through a brief historic changes that has happened, and because we have been seeing a lot of changes in last 3 years, which were not there in entire 30 years, and uh, and the opportunities and the opportunities before all of us across sectors, across tax. I tried to put in everything in one small picture, and then we will discuss few of them in detail, and then we will talk about and discuss specific scenario valuations across the this thing. Next page, Nitish. Yeah. So friends, as I was initiating and describing that why valuation was important, for any business, so to speak. It is requiring stability in the markets, and actually every person needs valuation to understand what are the value drivers, what are the underlying value of the current assets. He may or may not be able to undergoing any transaction for that matter, but one has to know as a business owner what value I have created over the years by putting so much effort and time into it. Or at least on an overall basis, he should be understanding what value he has built in for himself and for his entire stakeholders. Then it is also very critical for the key management to take certain decisions, to de-risk themselves on an overall investment basis. Uh, they have been investing into the company for so long, so good. Friends, investments, apart from investments, the valuation is very critical from a reporting purposes. Now, before 2007-8, India was not that connected worldwide in terms of the reporting requirements and the presentation of financial statements. But because of the openness of the cross-border interactions across India to all the developed countries and other countries of the world, there has been a need in the world to reconcile on the reporting frameworks. Because if I want to see some company in London or in Hong Kong, so their reporting requirements, if they are changed, their accounting policies are changed, so how we will be able to make our opinion about the same. So in order to correct that, the globally they have started following the international financial reporting standards, which we call as IFRS. These IFRS bring in a lot of standards, a lot of common areas and common grounds, wherein anybody can see, can invest, and can take a certain decisions on these companies worldwide, because the framework, the pillars of those building blocks are similar across the countries of the world mostly. So when this was happening, at the end of 2008, 9, 7, 8, 9 period, there came a lot of reporting requirements and hence the assessments of the valuation parameters. So we need to, as a valuer, help in proper reporting framework also of all these companies, if they have certain transactions during the year, and they have given certain stock options to their employees, and various other items, so to speak. The fair value has come into the play then, you know and initially it came into the accounting standard practices, then it adopted as Indian accounting standards, NDS as we call them. We will discuss about it more very soon. Okay, and then it is also very required for comparing how the market are performing in that sector, how I am performing in that sector, in terms of comparing the benchmark performance. Suppose I am in the steel industry, so how my steel industry is going in the market, and how I am performing, and how I am will be valued, so to speak. And hence manage risk efficiently whenever there is a critical decision making involved in the entire business processes. So one has to see that overall valuation, has it been created over a period of time or not, and how am I de-risking my business portfolio by changing certain critical things within my business offering. And friends, we all are witnessing a witness to the things that inaccurate and poor valuations are posing a lot of risk to the business, which means that inaccurate means it could be any side. So whatever is the optimum value, either you are giving a understatement or you're giving an overstatement. So both will hinder the company very differently, and it actually erodes away the entire trust and faith factor, and undermine the stability of the financial framework of the country. So I think these are the very critical things that we need to see. um, Next sheet. Yeah. So from business owner perspective, friends, why they should and while we are interacting to any business owners, we must be making these points very clear to them that worth is very invaluable, but one has to value it quite often now and then because of various reasons. uh, I hope you would be witnessing these things that in last 40 years the valuation paradigm has shifted from more of tangible assets to intangible assets. So when I say that, I mean that if you see the market values, the market cap of large companies in last 40 years, you will definitely see a sea change. When I say change, which means the maximum component of tangible asset values were there in the early 40s and 50s. So when you cross 60s and 70s era, I'm talking about case in point for S&P 500 US stock list. So when you cross 1950s and 60s, sorry, you will see a transition from tangible assets per se to building up of slowly and steadily intangible assets. And now, as we speak in 2000 and 2010, the entire share of overall valuation has been taken by intangible assets. So discovering of those values, because one creates a lot of value during their period of business, a lot of intangibles are created over a period of time. So helping understand business owner that how to monetize those assets, how to take best use of those assets in the businesses and times to come together is a real task. So we as valuers, as super specialists in this field, should not only help them, assist them, but also empower them to take right decisions with unlocking of these values for their own businesses. So business owners must understand what is their exact ownership of the assets, what all tangents those assets have in the market, which is very important for a business owner to understand, and that is can be done only through your help, by you indulging with them and taking them to next level. Also, whenever you have multiple business lines, it would help you in deciding, okay, which vertical I need to continue and which vertical I need to prune down. It is not making sense for us in the long time, and we can also look at diversifying it into certain other areas of business and stuff like that. So that is also a very critical decision from management perspective if you are a portfolio company, right? Then there might be a case in point that some people or some big company might look at you because you are going good and having some kind of USPs and intangibles attached with you, to want to take it over or want to join hands with you as a joint venture or a strategic partnership, right? So how would they decide what value they should fetch to you, or how you will decide as a business owner that what value should be discovered from that perspective. So all those things they have to call specialists like us to understand, to determine the overall valuation of that critical business in any mergers and acquisition. And yes, we all know that access to capital also requires a fair amount of good valuation of a company, so to speak, and to justify that I am able to value the company in the current state and form, so that it is very much there with respect to the market and the overall scenario of the economy, that I would be able to raise these kind of capital from the market. And capital can be raised from various perspectives. When we talk about banks, banks see this as more of a cash flow situations. But if you see from an investor perspective or from a capital market perspective, I think there's a lot of value unlocking happening. we have been assisting, a lot of private limited companies closely held, which are going or are planning to go to the capital market way. And I tell you, friends, huge amount of value unlocking happens. Huge. Even the promoters themselves have not thought about it in this way. The kind of value unlock happens for them when they go and access to capital and different kinds of capital in the market. I mean, these are some of the few perspectives that one can also empower the business owners to help them navigate their business decisions in the right way. And friends, in today's difficult times, uncertain times of COVID-19, it is not only our duty but also our moral thing that whenever we interact with the client, uh, prospective or current, you must also help them understand the quality of their assets, the value of their assets. Tell them that you need to understand the asset value in different way and different perspectives in today's disparate times to help them capitalize on those assets and then take on one to one with the extraordinary liabilities that is being on their shoulders. So it is very important, friends, to for us to make them understand and interact with your clients and prospective clients as corporates, because it is a very opportune time for us to engage with the corporates and clients. Yeah, Nitish, next page. Okay, I think most of us know, the historic value chain where we are coming from. The wealth tax rules we started off mostly in 1957 when they came into the being, and all the valuation perspective enacted by the laws have started from there on. But what I've done here, friends, I have just notified very critical changes here for us to brush up our history, that where it's coming from and where we want to go. So the basis of valuation still lies with the last change that we had seen in 1957 with respect to the wealth tax rules, which is section 34AB, for which we all are kind of valuers directly and indirectly. From a for a market perspective, from a capital market, and a lot of M&As are happening in the market. CCI has fixed certain parameters to value. Their guideline says that either you can value it on a net asset value method or profit earning capacity method, and for certain methods you have to apply the market value with respect to the listed companies. So it is a very straightforward directive issued by CCI in 1990 to carry on the valuation under certain typical guidelines within that framework of things. And as we know, 91, 92, the Indian markets opened up liberalized with under the flagship of Finance Minister Manmohan Singh ji. Then SEBI came into the being, and SEBI offered a lot of host of parameters and guidelines. How to price when you're going to the capital market. So the entire IPO pricing under the merchant banker started figuring new means and ways under the SEBI regulator. Then, friends, so soon the Institute of Chartered Accountants have realized that there is a need of some guidance, some kind of a technical input insights for the then valuers to steer the normal course of valuation, some indicative guidelines. So ICA came up with the technical guide on valuations in 94 and revised it up to 99, right? Then thereafter, in 2010, 11, RBI understood the need of transactions which is happening cross-border. So RBI and FEMA comes into the play whenever there is a change in currency across border. So if you're getting funds from abroad or you're deploying funds outside and elsewhere. So, they started changing the game, play there by asking for a forecasted cash flow method valuations, DCF, discounted free cash flow methods from 2010 onwards. Then, as we all know, 2013, the entire Companies Act changed after 50 years. It came along with the provision of registered valuation rules, which was supposed to be promulgated in 2013, but somehow or the other it got delayed. And hence, 18th October 2017, because of the new regulator IBBI, we were blessed to have these registered valuers rules into the play, and then the new regulations started coming in. But friends, in the meantime, what happened? As I told you earlier also, IFRS came into India and affecting Indian companies in early 2009-10s. So the Indian companies also traveled, 5, 6, 8 years from then. And in 2016, the Ind AS initially, for listed companies and then for other companies, depending upon their sizes and turnovers, started coming into the play year-wise, because everybody wants India to be at a global level playing field. Because if we are at that level, if we are at that parameter, then only we will be able to create some landmark in the overall scenario of the world. And after that, we all are witnessing the changes from the IBBI now and then, from 1st February 2019. I mean, everybody who is dealing with the Companies Act under Section 247 is forced to take the valuation decision by a IBBI approved valuer. So here we are, friends, and a small and short history of where it was and where we are today. And we have traveled a long way. Earlier the regulations were so prescriptive in nature, but now it is more detailed. And in present scenarios, friend, we are not only benchmarking ourselves with the world, but we are playing at a global level already, because somehow or the other, many of us are following global standards, are adhering to those global norms, because a lot of interaction is happening from cross border to India. So be it a startup, be it a growing company, be it a large enterprise, Fortune 500, and now everybody must be witnessing the stake sale in Reliance in last 1 month. The kind of stake, the portion of valuation that they have raised is amazing. Facebook of the world, KKRs of the world, and Microsoft of the world. I mean, amazing. So these things are happening at a very, very high level. So why, friends, these are able to take such a easy stake here and there? Because the discovery of price, the frameworks are very similar worldwide. So these transactions are taking place very easily. So in a lifespan of a company, it goes through various stages, friends. I mean, this is a very interesting point which I've kept up for discussions with us. I'm trying to give insights for criticality of all the segments of valuers, because it is our duty to understand the business aspect first. If we are able to understand any business aspect first, we will be able to appreciate, assess, and value their assets correctly. So be it we are the plant and machinery side, or from a land and building side, or from a securities and finance side, we all have to understand one single thing very particular, which is business. What business is my client into? What is his nitty-gritty? What is the stage of business cycle he is into? It is very important. So I've just kept 1 or 2 slides for us to understand that in a practical sense perspective, because I know you all are practicing valuation here and there. Some are very stalwarts and carrying huge amount of experiences in the background, and can share a lot of things together. But yes, I'm just connecting the dots here, friends, and facilitating certain critical points which we feel that is important for all of us to touch whenever we interact with the client. Nitish, next slide, please. Yeah. So as I was mentioning, friends, we all have to interact with the company from the birth to its death. So when I say birth, which means it's a startup in a small company as a startup, which begins its journey by looking at some innovative ideas to fulfill the market gaps, current and probable market gaps in the market, right? To a company which is already in decline, or which is proved to be insolvent and going to be liquidated, right? So we are required everywhere. In every life cycle stage of a company, we are very much critical to the decision. So yes, so the valuation is required at every stage for different reasons, friend. Initially, at a startup and growth level, it is more required from getting along and with the fund side. In the interim, it is required more from various different M&A perspective or from marketing perspective, and then requires for mergers and acquisition, and kind of seeing different sides of the different table. I would like to deep dive into this subject a little more from a more technical perspective. So Nitish, next slide, please. Yes, friends. I hope you are able to see, but don't worry. I'll just help you in navigating the same. So when I say startup, the bottom thing, what things we have to see, generally the traits of a startup, which means there will be hardly any or negligible turnover, right? That is the startup, because it has just begun its journey from scratch. There will be no proven track record of these kind of companies. They might come from a new and emerging sectors, which may or may not be present in the current or the past framework of things. And that is how they innovate. They innovate, and they come forward for these kind of typical business models of tomorrow. Like we nobody had witnessed Uber, Ola before, right? Until they came and showcased the difference between we getting a taxi, the corner taxi guy, Kalipili, and then we are getting this, upgraded 5-star facilities of the drivers and the facilities. And then the valuation methodologies are very typical. I'm going to cover this perspective at the end because I've kept it for our discussion on a practical note. And and their cost of capital means, the cost of capital means the money that there is, the the interest bearing money, or the cost of borrowings is very high at these levels, because any investor would come in will be a very risky investor. He's gonna have a very higher expectation of his return from these kind of companies because his risk is also high. So a rate of return for the investors would be higher only. Then come a little, company which has got its product in place, had got certain kind of customers, paying customers, and it is modulated in one city or one framework of things, and then it is trying to grow a little bit. So in this, there is some kind of turnover or a precedent that is available, a very limited amount of 6 months, 1 year, 2 year. Now valuation methodology that they can follow is again depends upon the business model. I'll come to valuation methodologies also, as you all are gone through this in your examination perspective. And the cost of capital still remains high for a growing company. But when it transforms from a growing company to a high growth or a mature company, then there's a lot of precedents. A 5-year track record, a 10-year track record of a company is there. So you can see how a company is moving from where it was to now or today, and can backtest things very much, because it has seen ups and downs of various economic life cycles, and the sectorial themes. So you have got a potential detail which is there in last historic perspective. Then you have got a business model, actually a framed business model, where is a substantive amount of asset base in kind of tangible also, and opportunities of that intangibles also are there with respect to these kind of growing and maturing companies. Now here the cost of capital is reduced because the risk appetite is reduced for the investors. This is the time where the company is also seeing that I am at a moderate risk level. I have been established in the market. I am carrying certain amount of market share. My pricing is very in line with the market, and hence they will demand certain kind of optimum cost of capital from the market, and it would not be very aggressive cost of capital from the market. So this is how it transforms to a growth level playing field. And then friends, when a sector goes through a declining trend, every sector has its own ups and downs, like cement, like steel, like non-man-made fiber, and many other sectors which have different kind of crest and troughs during their life cycle. Now that ups and downs could be 2 years, could be 4 years, could be 8 years, right? But these are called cyclical sectors. So cyclical sectors pose different problems. which I will also mention at the end. I've kept it for a separate section on a practical note. So whenever a company is declining, the obviously the profit drops, the top line drops, and it has got a substantive history of past track record, maybe 20, 30 years of background to it, that the company has done so good in past times, and now it is entirely going down under. So you have to understand, friends, that whenever a client comes to you, what stage of life cycle they are into, which is important, because to understand what could be a marketing perspective to what you're valuing as such. So there has to be a very strong commercial angle, friends. uh, so now valuations have evolved. It is no longer a technical subject, so to speak. It has become techno commercial. Technical expertise is required, but how do you transform it, relate, and connect to the commercial side of the world is very important, because any commercial decision is taking upon based upon certain kind of value drivers. So value drivers could be financial and technical both. So we as a technical valuers has the responsibility to bridge this gap between the technical side of valuation that we understand and do thematically, and also attach commercial angle to it very strongly. Because every decision has a commercial angle to it. And yes, so here it brings in a lot of action in the market, that why the markets are uh, why the markets are responding to specialists like us as valuers. I will take you through the some critical numbers which is available globally to make us understand the importance of valuation, friends. Again, we are all discussing about the importance. Every stage of life cycle of a company, the valuation is required by some or the other expert like us. So if we understand in greater detail, the more we are able to help and empower the business owner to decide on various critical things in life. Friends, in my past career, I have seen one thing very critically, that whenever you involve and engage with the client deeply. When I say deeply, you have to engage with him to understand the business model, the flow of the businesses. What challenges he's facing personally. In yesterday and today and tomorrow. Sitting with him, brainstorming these things. Immaterial, whether you are valuing their livestock, their plant machinery, their building, or their other assets for some special reason. But once you are able to comprehend and understand his background, his company's background, his sector's relativity, what he's doing, what he's trying to do and transform in next 3 and 5 years, it's an amazing piece of learning for us. And friends, in the process of valuation, in the entire process of valuation, you end up giving lot of value adds to your client unknowingly, because it is your expertise, the technical part, which comes into the play and transforms and give those value adds to the company. How? Okay, let me give an example. We've been to a company. So these auto ancillary company head office was in second and third floor. So I was sitting in the reception area on a second floor, waiting for the GMD, Joint Managing Director, to see us. For those 5-6 minutes, I felt some kind of vibration in the ground. The dining table kept over there was a little bit vibrating. So I asked the receptionist, why the dining table is vibrating a bit. So she mentioned that because of the Maruti being the one of their key clients, they wanted certain kind of assemblies to happen in the basement of the company. So I asked her, because that is why the vibration is there in the floor. She said yes. So I was zapped, and I mentioned the same thing to the joint managing director of the company. I said, have you tested the factory premises for its stability report on a regular basis, on a yearly basis? He said just no. And friends tell you, those companies were in joint venture with Japanese. So 50% joint managing director is an Indian, and 50% joint managing director is a Japanese guy. Despite of this strong relationship with international corporates and conglomerates, so why I give you this example? I went there for some different reason, but I found this happening, and I suggested very strongly that, sir, you should go for a stability certification of this building very regularly, because you are carrying this kind of work down under, and God forbidden anything happens to this factory, where all critical employees are sitting in this company, are at risk. It is one of the most critical business risk. If you remember, when we started, we talked about de-risking. This is just one simple small example to de-risk a business. Similarly, friends, when you go as a valuer, as a technical valuer, as a P&M valuer to visit any factory or process flow things, you may end up giving certain good suggestions for their power consumptions, for the process flows, for any kind of manufacturing setups that may add value to their business. And friends, these kind of value adds are just not available otherwise, because you have access to those small and nitty-gritty details, because by the virtue of your profession and specialty, you tend to interact so close with your asset class that you are able to see those gaps, and professionally, and with your background and experience that you carry, with so much of valuation and technical expertise that you have on your shoulders, you are able to give such kind of good and important perspective to things to your clients. And the client will never go anywhere leaving you, because you're not only a valuer, but you are a well-wisher, but you are a value added to him for life. So friends, these are some small critical examples where you keep on adding value to your client's business, and we all have to grow, right? The client will grow, you will grow. So that's the point. So I thought I would share some perspectives to it. This next slide, please. Friends, I've just mentioned these, India perspective M&A deals, because we have been talking in last few slides about M&A, how the mergers and acquisitions happening in last, 8-9 years. And they have been the favorite of all of us. And reasons could be many, sectorially, thematically, cross-border, new sectors, and all those things. In every deal, friends, in every deal, you require specialists like us to evaluate both the sides, to tell them what synergies lies between you two, right? And how it will impact not only your current state but future state. How you unlock your value with that partner, or with this party or that party. The triggers may be because of any reasons, because you're over leveraged, you're not able to go to multiple locations, your strengths are different geographically, your vertical integration forward, backward, you had certain kind of critical teams with you, right? For which the client is asking to take you up and, align with their own teams to make a larger product, larger than life product. So there has been, a lot of active M&As happening in India, wherein not only Indian companies are doing the mergers and acquisition, but also the global companies are coming to India for these M&As. Next slide, Nitesh. Now you can see, if you will give you a perspective that, not only, domestic, but there is a lot of global cross-border mergers happening within India. And there is also business owners with diversified portfolios, as I was mentioning before also, that if I have a portfolio of companies, I will have to decide, whether I have to merge or demerge any company to unlock values and strategize it for the future. Now, for example, I, as the owner, I start 20 years back or 30 years back with one line of business, but over last 20, 30 years, I see and add very different stacks of businesses alongside with my core business over a period of 20, 30 years. And now if I see that every business line attached to the main business line has now become an individual sector in the market, and it has got its own potential. So I may unlock it by, demerging it separately to give it separate entity and separate vertical stack so that people can recognize and understand it separately from a main entity and can value it accordingly as sum of part valuation, and I will fetch a larger valuation henceforth. So these are all value drivers, friends. All these internal M&A happening is all value drivers. How to unlock value from a combined businesses. Then there are private equity guys who invest, in the high growth companies to scale them up, to have them, take them elsewhere than India. I've just given you a brief specs about these M&A, and all asset classes play a very critical role. So, as we understand and know that for any valuation exercise, the first thing that we need to know is the purpose of valuation. Because by defining the purpose of valuation, the entire set of requirement, output, intensity with which we all under engage with the valuation changes. So it is important for us to understand the purpose. Next slide, Nitish. Now, this is again a different graph which shows, the private equity and the venture capital deal happening for a. So as I said, as shown in the scenario of startups and growth companies, right? So here is the time, startups and the high growth companies, where these companies would raise some kind of venture capital funds from the market to enhance their top line, to penetrate into the geographies of market of the clients, and then hence can also see that how they will expand and go it from there fast and higher. And companies beyond startups and early growth stage, they see it as a private equity. So friends, I'll tell you a brief, when a company starts, it ventures into a more risky opportunity and it builds scale up. It requires more of a venture capital, because it is more risky asset class. And when a company establishes and, grows at a level where it finds that, okay, I've grown to a decent level here, then I might be finding different kind of capital. Then they switch from venture to private equity. Private equity is a little larger in quantum, say 20 million or 15 million upwards USD. And it is given to generally growth companies which are looking at a higher level of growth path from there on, expanding to multiple locations worldwide after being successful in Indian context. So, I mean, this slide gives you a little hands-on to the capital raised in India from the funds, both Indian and global, and number of deals that Davis done. It's good. I mean, there's a lot of action, friends. So this action will lead you to the prospective clients or the probable valuation assignments across sectors, so to speak, when you indulge into these kind of activities and things. I don't know how many of you understand startup that deeply and are in line with the startup fraternity and those things. But I've kept one slide for you. Nitish, next slide, please. So we have discussed venture and private equity, but below venture capital comes the angel fund, angel investing. So who are angel investing? Who are angels, and why we call it angel investing? Friends, when a startup begins, it makes some kind of prototype product, right? Which he feels that, okay, this will work in the market. So when that prototype product is accepted by his probable customer and the customer is kind of ready to pay him, so there is a journey to it. So for some kind of businesses, they may or may not require substantive capital to make that case in point to reach out to the customer, final customer, and get the money out. But in many of the cases, they require some kind of money, right? So they raise it to friends and families first as they begin within the friends and family, and then they go out to the these kind of angels. So why we call it angels? Because they are the CXOs of the large enterprises who understand how business is regulated and how business is being done, who have created the business for themselves, and business owners themselves, right? So these business owners and CXOs of businesses, large businesses, come together as angels. Why they call angels? Because they are coming to these startups to help them in their journey of beginning up, right? In supporting not only with money, but with the connect, with their expertise. They offer them right then and there. The boss, you are doing not correct 100%. Test it like this. It will work much better, right? Or your go-to-market strategy should not like with this, not like with that, right? And we offer a lot of connects to them. They please speak to him. He's a good guy. He will able to develop your technology framework. Or this guy is good in distribution network, right? If you're building a product, it has to reach to the customer. So how would you be able to reach to a customer even if after you're making a product? So everything carries a cost. So these are called angel investors. So angel investors have also been rising in India. Now India is a startup nation. It comes in top 5 position across the world, right, after US, China, and hence the startup framework as a separate stack up is building up in India. And you can see a lot of action in the angel investing in last 5-6 years, and follow-on funding after the angel has funded by a VC fund or early stage funds of India. So there is a lot of action, friends, for new business verticals, for new emerging business verticals. So for us to understand and learn, those verticals is also important, because ultimately those companies will become the Flipkarts of the world, or somebody's of the world over a period of time. So yeah, next slide, Nitish. So now I am showcasing the entire stack in this slide. So here you will be able to understand the motive. I've kept 3 things for 3 reasons. Why? Because the first stack is of transactional, where if there is a transaction, then only the valuation is required or triggered. So I call it as a transactional valuation deck. And second, I call it as a regulatory, because these are being called for whenever a company is required to adhere to certain kind of regulations. Third, I am calling it as accounting, because in preparation and presentation of accounts, you require these kind of valuations to be done by a valuer. Now, I will touch upon each one of them very quickly, and then we might go to a special cases one by one. So as we were discussing that, in most of the buyouts, in most of the acquisitions, in most of the mergers between 2 companies, a lot of that not there before. So every this type will require a valuation to be done. If it is a merger between the 2 companies, the valuation of the 2 companies is required. The entire assets, plant, property, equipment, current assets, everything has to be valued and has to be brought together for a merger ratio, for a swap ratio, right? For the acquisition, it is the valuation of the target company which is required. Now, for the fundraising also, it is required a lot of perspective that how your business is doing, how it is doing with respect to the overall market, what is the capability of the company inside out, and all those things. When a company is going for a stake sale, entire business sale or entire portfolio of business, right? Then comes the voluntary assessments. Very few people in this world, India takes this voluntary assessments very seriously. Why? Because some promoters, founders want continuous steering and monitoring of their value creation. That what value they are able to create in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years for themselves, for their entire stakeholders, as they move forward from X to Y. So these are more of a transactional nature. Friends, we have all been through the IBBI curriculum of valuation, and we are kind of I think well versed with the valuation international standards also. So we all understand that there are critical 3 pillars of valuation. The valuation approaches rest in asset approach, market approach, and income approach. I'll give you just an analogy that most of the company from one angle. But friends, when we are actually wanting to unlock the value of a company, we have to see it from both the sides. which means internally also and externally also. Then only we'll be able to make a right decision and come to a optimum conclusion at the end. When I say that, I mean, so when you follow the approach of analyzing and assessing the productive assets of the company. So why we call them as productive assets? Because they are generating operating cash flows for the company. They are the operating assets, right? So when they are the operating assets, this means that the present and the future cash flows are being generated through their economic use, through their economic life. So in a way, you are assessing the intrinsic value of a company with its assets given inside functioning for generating those value of the company. So it becomes the intrinsic value in internal perspective of the company. At the same time, you should go out and see the market perspective to a company. How market is given to freeze demand and supply, how they are valuing these type of companies, these type of sectors, so to speak, and hence similar type of companies in nature and size and vertical of your company, subject companies into how they are looking at it, either publicly traded or privately exchanging hands or selling stakes to private equities or venture capital or doing the M&As in the market or something like that. So by combining these two forces, internal assessments and external assessments, you will be able to conclude on a reasonable basis that okay, this is the optimum fair value that you need to put it across. It is very important. Do not place your decision on any singular number, just an advice. Okay, now coming to regulatory. So these regulatory valuations are very different in nature because some regulations will ask you directly to do valuation under such and such parameter. Somebody will say, okay, go and do it through NAV. Somebody will say, okay, go and do it through discounted cash flows. Somebody will leave it up to the best judgment of the valuer. That valuer is the best judge to identify the asset and to value the asset. So whenever you are doing any cross-border transaction, the company is doing a cross-border transaction. So the RBI or the FEMA comes into the play, right? And it gets you that any money invested from a foreign non-resident to a Indian company or Indian company is investing elsewhere in the world, taking out the money. So any capital transaction happening cross-border of any Indian company or into Indian company or from Indian company is touched based by the RBI and the FEMA. So every company has to file all these valuation reports to the RBI. Then comes the income tax. So we know that income tax section 56 is a very famous section on capital gain. So whenever you sell an asset, sell a right-in asset, so those things will trigger your valuation for income tax purposes. The client may enter into one transaction, but it can have a different influence. If he's taking money from abroad, he will be guided by FEMA. He will be required to fulfill the income tax, right? If he's also a listed company at the same time, he will have to see the SEBI guidelines, Companies Act, stock exchange, right? So you have also to see the holistic picture whenever a client comes to you, whether he's a listed client or a listed client. And accordingly, you have to ask him number of questions, tough questions, we as a specialist valuers, we have to be ready with a detailed checklist, friends, a very detailed checklist that, okay, when a client comes to you, you have to fill this checklist. It can be 10 questions, it can be 100 questions, depending upon what you want and how you want to define the assignment as. The more you ask upfront, the more you are clearer towards the timelines, the engagement level that you have to or your team have to devote in that. And it will also clearly assess your scope of work and hence the fee part. सबसे important is fee part. So you have to assess how much quote you need to present to the client. So it is very important for us to understand the scope of work. Now coming to the SEBI, for any listed companies, SEBI gives a host of pointers. Like when a company is going to take over certain other companies, right? It will give you a takeover code pricing model, right? When a company wants to issue a rights issue and it is raising capital from the market from the rights perspective, again, there is a separate guideline from SEBI to see that what rights issue can be brought about and what is the pricing range for a listed company. Similarly, when there is an acquisition, then also there is a guideline, there is a preferential allotment to the promoters and some people, there is a guideline. When you are going to list a company or delist a company, there are again guidelines, right? When you are buying back the shares of the company from the market, there is again a guideline. So SEBI is regulating the entire piece of market with respect to the capital market side. So all those listed companies are doing any critical actions on a capital side, right? So it is guided and regulated by the SEBI, and we have to follow those regulations. What all details they have given in those regulations and how we have to comply with that. Now coming to the Companies Act, the first and foremost act which we all bounded by now. But I think with the onset of valuation bill that is under the discussion nowadays, I think soon the next year, and we might see the Valuation Act also coming into being, and then all these regulatory bodies like RBI is asking more from a Category 1 merchant banker. Income tax is also asking from a Category 1 merchant banker. SEBI is mixed from merchant banker and all. Companies Act typically says from 18th of October 2017 that all the valuation has to be done by a IBBI registered valuer. Now, stock exchanges also, IBC, yes, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code says registered valuer. All other courts, high courts, DRTs of the world, and many other courts. So there has to be a consensus amongst all these regulatory classes or regulatory bodies to come to a platform that all of them require a single specialist, a single valuer kind to value all the assets. So there should not be any difference of opinion and difference of value. So coming back to the Companies Act, friends. Again, in the Companies Act, any capital transaction, wherever a company is going ahead to raise a capital, it requires a valuation. Okay? It might raise a capital through non-cash transactions also from the promoters. It may purchase or buy back the shares from the company or minority shareholders, right? It may enter into any kind of compromise on arrangement wherein the valuation of the company is important, right? Wherever, the company is going ahead as a solvency certificate declaration or valuing any interest in the company. So anything related to the value of the company, it has to be done by a specialist like us. So these are some of the pointers which I thought would be of interest to you from a regulatory standpoint. Coming to, friends, the accounting side, although a lot of regulation as of now is very silent and dormant upon who will be doing these things. So generally, upfront, who is making these reports on the ESOPs and making the ESOPs are generally, practicing professionals. But having said that, if it is done by us, it carries much more value. So to retain and to motivate employees, good companies issue stock options, the option given to the employees that they can convert that options into the shares in near future at a discount rate so that it becomes their part of their compensation package overall. It helps the company to make those critical employees stick to the company and also help motivate them being the owner of the company also because they're holding certain percentage of the company. And also company will make a roadmap as to when and how they will be able to encash in times to come, like 5 years, 10 years, whatever time. So these ESOP carries a lot of value in the accounting preparation and presentation because they form part of compensation of employees. I'm sure few of you must have done purchase price allocations in the past? If not, then let me define for easiness of you. Friends, when a company acquires any other company, like a company A acquires a company B, there is some price which is paid, which is over and above the fair value of the net assets bought. Which means, let's suppose, fair value of net assets of company B, which is a target to be bought, is 100 rupees. But company A is paying 50 rupees extra, which means the price company A is paying to buy company B is 150 rupees, for example. Which means company A has paid extra 50 rupees over and above the fair value of the net assets. What is this 50 rupees? Now, earlier in early 2000 era and before that also, people used to call it, okay, because the company is so old and done this and that, so this will be a goodwill portion, right? A goodwill that a company has earned over these periods because of being in existence, because of being able to develop certain things, certain capabilities they have in-house, right? But friends, as we discussed that IFRS is there coming, and all these global practices are coming. So came the purchase price allocation. What does this mean, friends? Which means that 50 rupees extra that a company A has paid in acquiring company B, it has to be broken down into various intangibles, which means the expert has to identify what all valuable intangibles are present in that company, have to value it separately, and have to assign the value out of this 50 rupees. So for example, that company is having some typical software, right? So software has a value of 20 rupees, for example. Then the company has got certain distribution engagements or arrangements with the Pan India. They've got 500 distributors or stockists. So those carries a lot of value. So let's suppose 30 rupees or 20 rupees goes to that. Now the balance 10 rupees, which is not able to be allocated to anything else, will go to a residual goodwill. So people call it as a residual goodwill because it is the balance amount left over transferred to the goodwill portion. So wherever it is possible, one has to identify, evaluate, assess, and hence put a value to the identified values of intangible assets. This process is called purchase price allocation, which means the purchase price that a borrower, that a acquirer has given to the acquiree has to be allocated into identified intangible assets, and rest balance will go to the goodwill. This is a very deep exercise, friends. It seems so simple, but it is very intricate. These are large assignments generally done by Big Fours, but we can also do, right? Okay, now impairments. Why impairments? See, earlier there was rule-based depreciation, right? Chart is there. You go to the chart, see, identify, and apply those rates to the assets and come out, right? But after IFRS and Ind AS, we are in the era of fair valuations, which means what is the fair value of the asset today on the reporting date, and hence it carries lot of value to the assessment of balance useful lives of the assets, depending upon their usage, depending upon their capacities, depending upon their maintenance, depending upon many host of other qualitative and quantitative factors. So we don't call it depreciation now, we call it impairments, because we test the quality of the assets every now and then, and hence we'll test for impairments, as we call, how much it has been impaired. For example, I have bought a B company in, let's suppose, 2016. So what is the status of that borrowing price or the goodwill or the intangible assets today in my balance sheet in 2020? I will test that every year, right? Which is very important, right? Whether those facts and circumstances are similar in nature when I bought it in 2016 or not in today's time, so that my asset carries the similar value, the similar importance in my balance sheet. and it has to be tested for impairment every year. And then there are host of friends, dozens of Ind AS sections, portions, depending on various asset class. Few of them I will touch it for you at the end, and which are very critical also. But yes, the most critical of them is one Ind AS, which is number 113, which talks about fair value measurement, which means it talks about the framework of Ind AS, how it has to be done. So a lot of weightage, friends, is given to the market. How similar asset in the market is behaving. How similar asset in the market is being assessed from a demand and supply perspective. So India's framework is also running on a fair value. Now, friends, if you compare, the change in the regulation in 2017 and the already existing framework of India's fair value are not different, which means now in India, we will be talking about the fair values only, right? India is entirely stacked upon fair value, reporting and preparation framework. What you are doing as a valuer, again, this story is coming from fair value. So if you are valuers from the era of Veritax Act or for the institutions or banks, you are more familiar with words like fair market value, friends, because those institutions are calling it as a fair market value. So if you go, friends, deep down into the definition of fair value as per Ind AS or as per IBBI, you will find a lot of copy paste or reference to global definition of fair market value. So fair market value as defined in the West and fair value what defined in our framework of things is not that different. Only local adjustments or specifics to adjustments have been done in India. Rest, line by line, presumption of willing buyer and willing seller and arm's length transactions and no force and no compulsion. So all these matrices are coming straight away from the fair market value definition of the West. So whatever they call it in the West as fair market value, we call it here as fair value. I thought just to discuss these practical aspects side by side as it comes. Nitish, next. Next sheet. Yeah. So friends, I was just discussing with you, some of the requirements. So I just mentioned and highlighted, like Companies Act 2013 outlines section by section. They require a registered valuer for different reasons and causes of interacting with the capital in the company's balance sheet. So wherever the capital is, triggered and evaluated, and hence the requirement of valuation comes into the play. So all these sections are the sections wherein we need to value the assets for some purpose or the other. You may go it in detail because this slide will be shared with you. Next sheet, Nitesh. Again, for a listed company, SEBI regulations take the role of critical regulator, and hence for any interactions with the market of these companies from a capital perspective, the valuation has to be done as per the SEBI regulations stated under each one of these regulations separately, and we have to follow those guidelines and hence conclude the valuation exercises. Next sheet. Okay. Again, this is a repeat of RBI and FEMA guidelines, wherein we see that any investments coming into India or going out of India requires valuation to be done by a merchant banker or a valuer. I think these all will be converging into a registered valuer soon after the enactment of valuation bill soon. So we will have a common platform for all of us, to deal with these kind of things. Next slide, Nitish. Okay, Income Tax Act, as everybody know, 11 UA rule and 56 section is the trigger section for valuation of assets under capital gain. There are valuations required in the transfer pricing also to justify and assess the arm's length transactions for a company selling the company, selling the products or services within the company at arm's length to any other transaction which is being doing with any third party. So these kind of transactions are being tested in the income tax special cell, transfer pricing cell, which is specialized to undertake the justifications and the detailings from these kind of underlying assets. Next sheet. So friends, I was telling you and mentioning about the Ind AS, which are aligned to the international standards, used by the Indian corporates. And these are some of the critical Ind AS which are being followed very regularly, which are more in use for any and every corporate. So I was talking about the fair value measurements. Ind AS 113 is the building block of fair valuation measurement. That how you have to do the measurements of fair value under all Ind AS. Like, so you have to give a proper weightage of market assessments. Then you have to come down to the replacement cost, and then you come down to the assessment of the excessive cash flows that is generated by the productive assets. But at separate instances, right, as I was telling you, when a merger is happening, when a business combination is happening, you may have to test on a reporting framework here, Ind AS 103. So you have to value the assets of the company for this purpose, reporting purpose, right? So if you understand the purpose of valuation, you will be able to follow Ind AS 103 properly, and hence value all the critical assets of the company accordingly. Now, as I was mentioning, intangibles are very important part of any business vertical. So Ind AS 38 gives you a detailed procedure of how to be followed in case of intangibles. Ind AS 16 gives a detailed assessment of things in property, plant and equipment, PPE as we call it in short form, right? So all the technical assets under Ind AS 16 is taken care in PPE. Now in impairments, all the impairments are being highlighted and sequentially stacked in Ind AS 36. When a company has invested in an investment property, then it has to follow Ind AS 40. Employee stock options are covered under Ind AS 102. And in general, any kind of financial instrument that a company holds, preference shares, stocks, other kind of instruments, those instruments are valued under Ind AS 109. So these are just, friends, a gist of 4 or 5 critical Ind AS that is being required generally by all the corporates in their reporting frameworks on 31st March every year. There are hosts of other Ind AS also for larger companies. Many of them get triggered, but these are the critical main ones which I thought to at least mention and discuss with you, that these are very specific and these require special mention. And if possible, if you are able to go through few of them also, and will be very helpful for you, friends, to give you a perspective of overall things, how you do and what you do. And it's a big market, friends. It's a very big market. Even if, for example, any CA is doing, or a professional is doing a work of Ind AS, underlying assets, you are the expert, friends, who will tell the, after assessing the, condition and maintenance of the machines, or, the structures or buildings or land replacement cost. You are the guys who gonna tell them that, boss, these are the fair values of these technical hard assets, That is how he will complete it and join it and put the value in the balance sheet. So friends, with this, I complete the session in a one go, but I wanted to discuss some critical points with you. Again, from a purely practical side, because this session is not a lecture, not a class, but it is just a pure vanilla experience sharing. Whatever we have experienced in our past in 20 years of full service valuation firm across asset classes, across stations, across India. We are just trying to share all those things with you guys. And we believe in sharing, and we keep on sharing these things with you, and people can reach us anytime. I have kept separate stacks, friends. Now coming to next slide, Nitish. We'll love to take your questions after that. I complete these 3-4 critical slides. Start of valuations. So many people, many valuers have a lot of questions. Sir, how we will value startup? When the startup founders themselves have no clue. When I say no clue, means they understand what they are doing, but they will not understand things from our perspective, right? What we need, why we need, what for we need. So those things really need a deep insights. We all have to combinedly assess those things. So friends, startup valuation is guided by three principles, right? Which I mentioned here. In the West, in advanced countries, generally these kind of things are followed. Typical venture capitalistic methods, right? I'll come to that. Second is how market is seeing these startups, these new ventures, these new, emerging businesses. So these comes with the market transactions information. Then if the company is revenue generating and they have some customers, basis that, then basis their product evolution, they will like to understand what potential cash flows one can generate, with such kind of a new product, new technology, new service framework of things, right? Now, if you analyze, friends, this critically, this is nothing but market approach and income approach. So when I talk about potential cash flows, you can straight away say income approach. You are doing nothing but understanding, assessing, and reviewing the amount and accuracy degree of the potential cash flows of the company from the kind of assets that they have, and then submitting it for a value. When you're comparing any market transactions, it is a market approach. You are similarly ideating with the similar market assets and how market is behaving, how market is giving the values to these kind of sectors, companies, startups. Now, venture capital method, friends, is nothing but a thumb rule, as we call in India. What is thumb rule? For example, a startup comes to me and asks, okay, sir, I need 50 lakh rupees, 40 lakh rupees, 1 crore rupees, right? What I will do? He will not have any precedent 5-year track record, right? Where I can go back and see. He will not have any, may or may not have direct industry multiple, so to speak. This industry will start in 5 years or 4 years, or this industry sector will start in 2 years to profit. So what is left to me? I will understand from the founder who has come to me that who is he, first of all? What is his qualification? What is his background? What is his personal SWOT? What is his capabilities, right? And why? Why he wants to start this business? What opportunity does he see? So you have to travel with him in his journey in the recent past to understand why he wants to do this business. So the major money decision for you as an investor will go to his personal net worth, which means you will deploy money 50% on his understanding of the market and the opportunity, and rest 50% you will deploy on him as a person who will do this idea, who will execute this idea. So these are called venture capital methods, which means you will do your analysis. Okay, how is the founder? How is the market? How is the market, the pain point he's assessing? Who is the team who's going to execute this, right? Is there any USP of this product or service or not? Some critical methods. So venture capitalists in the West has made different models, which you may or may have also studied in your IBBI exams also. So some make it as a risk matrix, some make it as a, just value it as a, these pointer basis, like these 4-5 qualitative factors, and hence value it. Okay, okay, I'll give you 50 lakhs for 15% or 15 lakhs for 20%, something like that, So these have become a little benchmarks of startup industry, so to speak, angel investing, as we were discussing. So these are the framework of things. So a lot of people come to me and ask, how do we do startup valuation? So yes, it's a mix of all these three friends. Back of your envelope calculation, which we call it as venture capital methods, when you see the qualitative factors. Then you will do a market assessment, which is very important to understand the product and the market of the company. Does it have the potential? Does it have those potential cash flows which he shared with you? You have to assess all these three things very, very, very critically, and then analyze it and put it forth for valuation. Nitish, next slide. Now, this is a very smart story. From beginning till end, you are there, helping companies to open, helping companies to shut. Isn't it amazing, friends? You are involved in every part of the life cycle of the company, from birth till death. So, under IBC code, right? Expert valuers are required by the insolvency professional. So insolvency professional has to appoint 2 registered valuers under each asset class if those assets are being present in the balance sheet of the company to assess fair value and liquidation value of the company as on insolvency commencement date, which is very important because our valuation date is insolvency commencement date and not our visit date. Right? You may, as an expert, have to mention that my valuation date is insolvency commencement date, ICD, and I have visited the site on this date. My signing off date is this date. So these 3 critical dates as a valuer you have to assess and put it in the report. We will be discussing about much detailer in report writing tomorrow and second half session. So I'm presuming that, friends, we all know the definitions of fair value and liquidation value as defined in the regulations itself. So regulation says that as a valuer, you have to do a physical assessments of the fixed assets and stocks of the company and have to assess the overall value as per the international standards. The regulations are very indicative, friends, at times. So you as an expert have to choose and adopt any international standards, valuation standards, which are adopted worldwide mostly and are very synchronous in terms of applicability into all the 3 asset classes, right? So generally, industry best practices is to apply international valuation standards, IVSC, London, which is prevalent in more than 53 countries of the world. And generally people benchmark those standards for doing such kind of valuations. So you have, whenever you guys are doing insolvency valuations, be very particular about not only about the techno-commercial aspect, but also about the legal aspect, because this is a very legal framework wherein you have to abide by a court appointed, a court nominated quasi-judicial person, which is insolvency professional. He is not a normal professional, friends. He is a super specialist, super specialist, right? And he has to be adhered to. He is carrying a timeline on his shoulders and you have to abide by those timelines behind him. Because after insolvency professional appointment, he is appointing you as registered valuer immediately. Second important task is you. So all the value discovery or value destruction happens through you. And it is a learning for him also, because as he travels with you the entire process, lot of information that you ask or substantiate from him may trigger a lot of other issues also, forensics and other stuff, right? So this is as far as CIRP regulations. So when a company goes into liquidation process regulation, friends, the regulation says that you need to assess realizable value of the assets, right? When I say realizable value of the assets, it is the assets value as on liquidation commencement date, right? The date changes now from insolvency commencement date under CIRP to a liquidation commencement date from a liquidation process regulation perspective. So you have to retest the value arrived by the previous valuer under CIRP as a liquidation value versus realizable value under the liquidation process separately. If there is a change in the circumstances, a change in the long gap between the 2 valuations, I mean, those have been taken care by the liquidator. Liquidator might call a valuation at different timelines and different zones. So these are some of the critical aspects which I thought to just brush through, because I think the next session will touch upon these topics in much larger, greater detail. So otherwise I would have elaborated it to any extent. Next slide. Again, I've identified insurance solution as a separate vertical because it is different. It requires a different mindset, friends, because any loss in the uh, assets which are covered by the insurance sum assured and the premium calls for a reinstatement value assessment from a IRDA perspective. Now, IRDA is again a regulator for insurance companies, which says that a reinstatement value has to be calculated, and this is forms the basis of uh, assessing the loss of profit or loss of claims. The claims that we file as a business owner after a certain loss has happened on the assets which are covered by the insurance policies and things like that. So the value rests on these reinstatement value. So one has to reinstatement value is not defined here anywhere else than the IRDA. So it is similar to the kind of depreciated replacement cost, similar to, not same, similar to depreciated replacement cost of the asset, uh, with very similar function, with similar efficiency and similar age life. There should not be any improvement. For example, there was an AC in my office which got burnt along with the office, right, in some mishappening. So my AC was 2-star rating, LG, right, 1.5 ton. I have to calculate the replacement cost of the same LG AC of same 2-star AC, 1.5 tons window AC, after assessing their age of these things and all those things, basis which the claim for loss will be filed. It is a little unusual exercise, so I thought to put a thrust on it. So, friends, again, I mean, as I say, a lot of things comes to play whenever the purpose of valuation is defined. With a lot of natural calamities happening all around us, there are floods in the West Bengal side. So there are forest rains here and there. Something or the other. Now having 5 earthquakes in North India in last 2 months. I don't know what nature is wanting from us. I mean, we all are struggling with COVID-19 itself, and we don't know whether we will be seeing year 2021 together or not, and what more destruction lies ahead. So all these are uncertain times, but which are forcing us to do all this kind of knowledge sharing and webinars sessions. But next slide, Nitish. The next slide is talks about the investment company valuation. Again, why it is different? Because of investments happening in our companies, Indian companies from global conglomerates or funds. Those funds want a neutral tax havens where these investments are rooted, which means they would be making a proxy holding company in Cyprus or Singapore or Hong Kong or Luxembourg or wherever, right, where there's a tax holiday. So they will pool in the money there, and these investment holding companies there will keep on funding the below the line subsidiaries in their operating assets. So how the discovery of these investment company happens? This investment company happens through fair value of their net assets. Again, if you see their balance sheets, friends, is nothing. On one side is the capital, on the other side is the investments. In this investment holding company, you will not find anything beyond this. So you need to assess the investment value of these investments in their below the line investments in those companies, right? It can be one company, it can be 10 companies, it can be many other companies. So you will carry out full-blown valuation of these underlying operating companies, which are investing companies of these investment companies. Full-blown valuation. You will have to apply all the approaches of valuation and then club them and restate the market value, fair value of those companies in respect of the investment value under the investment head in the balance sheet to value these companies. So that's how these companies are special, and they give you a perspective to things. Next, one more pointer, next sheet. Yeah. Again, I've kept this cyclical company as a separate class because every company has a different life cycle, as I was mentioning before also. Some have 4-year life cycle, some have 6, some have 8. So while assessing the valuation of any company which is cyclical in nature, which is come to you at a different size, it may have come to you at the bottom of the life cycle where it is going very bottom, or it may come to the peak of the session. So it is your duty as a valuer and an expert to analyze one full cycle of this entire troughs and crust, the entire cycle of bottom and top. and see what is the overall valuation of the company as an average. You should not do just a valuation at that one point, which means you will end up doing either the higher valuation or you will end up doing the lower valuation at that particular point of time. You have also to apply mind and see to the comparable companies method, which is a market approach. You have to see how those companies are being traded. You have also to do scenario analysis under the cyclical company evaluation, that under this scenario, best case scenario, worst case scenario, optimum scenario, how you are doing the assessment of these companies. So friends, this is almost brings us to the end of our exercise, and the last page is my detailing and the numbers, which you can think and ask us anytime. Now I will open the house to questions, and I'll request Nitish Bhai to help in taking up the questions, and I'll be happy to answer.
Sir, everyone is requested either they can type their questions.
Okay. Okay, great. So Anilji has asked, please explain residual value as per IBC. So for Anilji, regulation has not defined realizable value definition under the IBC, so to speak.
Keep your mic closer.
Yeah, it's now better?
Yeah, it's better now.
Yeah. Any other questions, sir? Please keep on typing. I'll try to pick up the name of the...
answer. Your video was blurring in the between.
Still now? Okay, I'm just putting it somewhere here. Okay, valuation of stock, right? So valuation of stock, Deepali ji is asking. Good question, ma'am. I mean, I'm presuming that valuation of inventory is for fair valuations. So it has to be seen from the purpose. What purpose? I mean, purpose drives everything. You have to understand whether it is being done for raising funds, or it is done for disposing it off, or it is done for giving some other resale value to the market. So you have to assess the quality and technical aspects of that stock also. Most of the times the bankers give the responsibility of valuing the stocks in the hands of the securities and finance guy. But it is my experience and request to friends that please take the help of the technical expert whenever you have to have the technical aspects of the inventory involved, because inventory is very intricate to a process of manufacturing also. So a typical asset requires a typical inventory. So do not hesitate to take the insights of a expert, like a typical chemical engineer or typical production engineer, which may of help to you in assessing the value of the stocks. Yeah. Harshit is asking a proposal to value company which is closed and company not how to assess. Harshit, I mean, valuation of stressed companies and a closed company is very typical because information available to the market is very scarce, and a lot of judgment is have to be kept in the physical assessment of the their site and understanding the market and understanding the backgrounds to the company. So qualitative factors will play a lot of role in assessing the right value of those assets of a closed company. Rushabh is asking whether IBA listed valuer do capital gain valuation today. Friends, as we live in today's environment, I mean, all the acts are not integrated, right? So certification required under the Capital Gain Act being a, income tax driven, so 34AB is able to do. Nevertheless, in, near future, when all the acts will be integrated, so thing has to be done by IBA guy only. Naresh is asking, in the future, individual valuer or a corporate will rule? Naresh, there is a segment of valuers required everywhere in the world. For every kind of business or profession, there are various segments: small segments, mid segments, high segments. So we will all have, plethora of cases for each segment. So don't worry about individual or corporate. It is all about, the opportunities that we all have to get through. Pramodji has asked difference between market value and fair value. Pramodji, again, which context, which regulation you are asking, I need to understand. I'll just explain from the valuation rules perspective. As I was discussing in the valuation also that, the fair value and is the value that is prevalent in India now after IFRS, be it India's or in valuation rules. So as far as India is concerned, we will follow the fair value. Fair value, to my understanding, is it's a value of a particular asset which I am valuing. Market value may be a generic value available around it, or of a similar asset or similar type when you are benchmarking. So, I mean, to my mind, fair value is the value of the subject assets. Might be, relative to the deriving the value it from the market value as such, as is. I mean, depending on the asset class also. Yeah. Any other questions, friends?
So there is a query of Phul Kumar Gaurji. What should be the
Just a
basis of
second.
rate per square meter of covered area in case of building?
Sir, again, it depends upon the purpose, sir. I'll keep coming to this same question. For what purposes you are valuing the current exercise? So what rates you are applying? Are you applying the straight rates or central rates? Again, the output is the value is to resell it or to get the loan or to get a fair value measurement for reporting purposes. All the three will have different orientation to it, right? So please always focus on the purpose, because purpose will define and ease of most of your questions on a logical way, because logic will never defeat you anyways. Naresh ji asked very interesting and very close to heart question. What fees to quote? Very good. Friends, now we are super specialist. We are coming from various walks of life. We are architects, we are engineers, we are corporate guys, we are professionals from various walks of life. And on the top, we are building the valuation. It's like an icing on the cake, friends. Cake is already there with us, but we are building an icing over it. So it is the responsibility and duty of all of us, friends, to not demean the this profession by fighting for fees. Try to create value rather, because we have gone through a lot of changes, lot of learnings, and lot of disciplinary actions also. Now our every report will be reporting to the RVO indirectly and reporting to the regulator. So everybody can see and catch hold of a person who has signed the report. So friends, be very cautious, be very mindful of doing anything that you want to do and undertake. Mention everything in the report and defend yourself at the time of need. So purpose is what is defining everything, and make your scope very clear, as detailed as possible, and involve your man hours also, and accordingly your fee statement. So fees is derivative of all these things, friends. Manas Desh is asking if it is not possible to apply DCF, right? See, friends, I have discussed the entire valuation vertical in two aspects: market and income. Even if income is not possible because it is into losses, right? You can always apply multiple of market, right? Market approach is always there to that asset or to that company. So please do not just blank foldedly take book value as the value until and unless mentioned by a particular regulation under which you are valued. Always use the market reference. As I said, value is driven either by the intrinsic value or by the market assessment of your asset. As per today's condition, sir, IBB valuer is enacted by Companies Act, and hence Companies Act activities are all guided by and done by valuers under registered under IBB Act. But having said that, a lot of other institutions are also trying to inbuilt and take the help of these special forces of valuers. And in times to come, with the new Valuation Act, everything will be converged into single experts like you. So don't worry about it. Ramesh is asking voluntary assessment. Ramesh, if you remember my first and second slide, where I'm asking that a lot of corporates need to assess their valuation, अगर उनका कोई stake sale हो रहा है या नहीं हो रहा है, M&A हो रहा है या नहीं हो रहा है, right? There's no underlying transaction also, one has to get value yourself to see that what value you have created for your business with your team, with your intangibles, with your assessments. It will help you to steer entire framework of business in times to come, right? Srinivas ji, I mean, these questions of capital gain valuations may or may not come, in times to come, but these kind of confusion will be wiped out soon. Don't worry. With onset of the new valuation rules, it will be wiped out. Because capital gain valuation is triggered by Income Tax Act, so whatever written in the Income Tax Act is going on. But as we speak, as we go further from here, there would be a lot of consensus in the all the areas of valuation and all the framework of these acts. All will converge down to the single things. Yeah. And yes, presentations will be shared with you from the RVO side.
Yes, sir, we will share it in the group.
Yeah. Mr. Dash is asking small company and no transaction in the past. But still, I mean, the valuation has to be done from more than, net asset perspective. You have to see how you can apply those market approaches to it. There has to be a way out. Harshit ji asking contact details. Sir, you can type my name and Crest Capital on Google. You'll get my details, everything, everywhere. I'm on LinkedIn, very active. So please follow me on the LinkedIn. My numbers are there in the presentation. Happy to help.
The presentation, they can take it from there also.
Yeah. Nanji is asking, RP reduced quantum of assets, the scope of work change, report already submitted. Can we charge for changing a report again? Yes, Nand Kishore ji, you have to see the the scope of work that is defined and approved between you two. And whenever so there are times, friends, when the resolution professional at the time of taking the charge of the company is not having relevance to the reference to the acquisition of the or positioning of the assets. So as and when he gets position of the assets, he will give you the assets for valuation. So you can devise your engagement with him accordingly, right? So that is happen. That is a practical part of the story. Naresh is asking, when IP want their value on our report, what to do? I like this question. Naresh ji, give value what you can arrive at and what is feasible and logical from that asset. If that asset will be able to derive 20 rupees, you can mention 22, you can mention 18. You cannot mention 10 or 30. I hope you understand. Dipali ji is asking, is 1113 Ind AS has its yearly? Dipali ji, Ind AS has followed in reporting framework. When I say reporting, which means 31st March every year, right? So every company has to test these kind of reporting frameworks for any transactions happened during the year or for the preparation of the financial statement, which is happening on 31st March as far as India is concerned. So yes, it is a yearly exercise for all the corporates mostly. Mr. Dash has got too many questions. When value is negative, can we value shares at 1? Again, Mr. Dash, it depends upon the regulation for which you are valuing. Does it warrant you to value the shares at fair value or not? At face value, sorry. It has to be seen. Gauravji is asking, as we know that market value is different from market value, what document we can keep to justify it?
So it was fair value and market value.
Guideline value. If I got it your question right, Gauravji, whatever basis you may adopt for valuing whatever assets we are discussing here, because I do not have full information, neither you have mentioned one. Are they talking from a civil perspective or a P&M or what perspective, right? So when you mention guideline value, I presume you are talking on a civil side. So yes, you should have all the critical documents basis which you are deriving the adjusted value, which is called fair value for your asset. So you have to keep those documents for reference in future, because as a valuer, you have to save them for a certain number of periods for future to defend yourself in case any authority asks you for defending the valuation. Rights issue, Koteshwar Rao ji is asking, rights issue required registered value valuation as per the Companies Act. Koteshwara ji, just I mean, subject to the convergence of all the acts, the rights issue may be required to be valued by a registered valuer for the Companies Act perspective. But if SEBI as a regulator, as I said, SEBI as a regulator of listed companies, if they say that it has to be required from merchant banker, then as a company, it has to be done as of today by both merchant banker also and by Companies Act, you also as a registered valuer also. Yes, till the time we have or we make sense of the overall convergence of the acts into one. So till the time we are into that, we can do. And we can wrap up, friends, and we are happy that we could be of any, some practical value to you. And if you still have any questions within the time period today, tomorrow, I'll be happy to assist you for tomorrow's second half session on report writing issues and challenges, right? Thank you all. Thank you, friends. And, you can always tag us along on the LinkedIn or, get email us or something or SMS us. I may or may not be available on the call all the time, but happy to assist. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Nitesh. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gagan sir, for this elaborated session. Gagan sir is taking tomorrow's second session, report writing and best practices, from 12:30 to 2:30. If anyone want to join, they can log in through the DGFRB website and they can register themselves there. Guys, we will be